Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the AI for Good Summit. We hope that you, your families, and your friends are healthy and safe. My name is Bastiaan Kwast from the ITU, the International Telecommunication Union, and I have the privilege of introducing today's webinar called Keeping Our Children Safe with AI. I'm joining today from Geneva, Switzerland. The ITU is the United Nations Specialized Agency for Information and Communication Technologies, and it is also the organizer of the AI for Good Global Summits, which are held annually in Geneva, Switzerland, in partnership with 36 sister United Nations organizations, ACM, and co-convened with Switzerland. And with that, I think it's now time for me to hand it over to our facilitator, UNICRI. Hey, UNICRI, how are you?
Bastiaan, thank you so much. Fantastic the way you introduced the webinar. I'm really excited to kick off this meeting and this series of the AI for Good Summit. My name is Irakli Beridze. I'm head of the UNICRI Center for Artificial Intelligence and Robotics. First of all, I would like to thank our partners and sister organization ITU for organizing AI for Good Summit together with all the partner agencies from the United Nations. UNICRI is one of the founding partners, joined the movement since 2017, and we participated in all ITU AI for Good Summits, organizing different platforms and different discussions. At the UNICRI Center, we are exploring benefits and risks of artificial intelligence from the perspective of crime prevention, criminal justice, rule of law, and human rights. We're trying to understand how this technology can be used by criminals or terrorists at the same time, how it could be used by law enforcement. And with that, we have a specialized platform together with Interpol. We call it AI for Law Enforcement, organizing global meetings. What we are also doing is that we're trying to figure out how AI-related solutions can solve crime-related problems. As you can agree, internet became a really essential and unavoidable part of our everyday lives, and even exponentially amplified during these strange times that we are finding ourselves with the COVID-19 pandemic. Most of our children at the same time are digital natives. They were born into this technology, and it is as much a part of their childhood as, for example, toy trucks, dolls, footballs, or rocking horses were our childhood, or my at least in particular. In some households, unfortunately, AI assistants like Siri or Alexa are even considered as a member of their families, like some sort of a strange big sister or a brother that is always there and ready to answer our questions. According to our friends at ITU, 70% of the world's youth are online. And on the one hand, that's fantastic. And that's approximately 30 million children. Imagine that. These are truly immense figures. At the same time, as the internet becomes more accessible and widely available, children, many of these very young children, are increasingly finding themselves at the forefront of internet adaptation. Despite the benefit of the internet, which is definitely clear and there, it is of course also a cause of great concern. Even in the comfort of our homes, danger definitely lurks. And the reality is that few parents, let alone children, truly grasp this or truly grasp the magnitude of this. Whether it is in terms of the vast quantities of the data, which is collected on our children through websites, or the smart devices, or the growth in the online child sexual abuse materials, CSAM, or simply child pornography, which is often referred to, the increasing availability and accessibility of the internet has exposed our children to great danger. UNICEF has indicated that approximately 1.8 billion photos are uploaded every day to the internet, of which some over 700,000 are believed to be CSAM, and numbers are only growing. Abuse has also escalated from the handful of low-quality images to entire sophisticated cyber loggers or high-definition videos, and cryptic advertisements on the surface web to online grooming, detailed reviews of individual children, and live streamed abuse of dark web forums. The COVID-19 pandemic has also played a significant role in these trends, with many law enforcement agencies noting an increase in the amount of CSAM being reported, as both perpetrators and victims find themselves increasingly connected during the lockdowns. Recent reports from our colleagues at Europol or Interpol are proven examples of that, and they are available online in open source materials. This is the problem we face, but what are we going to do about it? That's why we are discussing this today. Just as the technology is a part and parcel of the problem, technology can also be part of the solution, hopefully. A danger of different types of technologies are currently being used to tackle online CSAM, a range of different types, including hashing technology, blocking and filter technologies, web crawlers, and keyword matching. I hope to hear more details from our speakers later today, which we will. But today we are discussing also artificial intelligence, AI. How is the technology that we are here to talk about? AI is the technology that is often described as a game changer, like UN Secretary General refers to it very often. In the fight against CSAM, however, I would rather say that it can be a life-changing technology for abused and vulnerable children, aiding in the victim identification process, supporting law enforcement process, how they process reports, and hopefully they do it faster with this way, and facilitating investigative processes. As I said already, our esteemed speakers of the day will talk in more details about how AI can play a role in combating rise of CSAM and what law enforcement and other concerned stakeholders need to think about as we approach the use of this technology. But allow me to say the potential of this technology is real, and it is hopefully really great and hopefully life-changing. I'm honored that you are all chosen to join us here today in order to, in doing so, you evidently place great importance on protecting our children and great hope in AI as a solution. For this, I thank you all for joining us. Without further ado, I'm pleased to get our event underway so that we can all start really exploring this life-changing technology. With this, I'm going to introduce our keynote speaker, Joanna Rubinstein, who is the president and CEO of World Childhood Foundation USA. Joanna is an expert in global health, early childhood development, child protection, and sustainable development. Joanna will talk about the foundation and will introduce the topic for us. Joanna, floor is yours, and please turn your video, which you already did, and we are looking forward to your keynote.
Thank you so much, Irakli. This is a great privilege to be here, and I think you already mentioned a lot of very important things that I also intend to mention. So, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, friends, it is my great pleasure and great opportunity to discuss with you the need for technology, especially artificial intelligence, to address the explosion of child sexual abuse and exploitation online. Today, 1/3 of all the internet users are children. Because of the COVID pandemic, more and younger children are going online. The good news is that in a dark time, when humans are isolated in unprecedented ways, children are benefiting from the internet by spending more time playing, socializing, and accessing education online. But let's remember that connectivity also has a dark side that we too often don't discuss. Today, I need to talk to you about what all of us find so hard to discuss, the misuse of our wonderful technological advances to abuse and exploit children. But we are not helpless. On the contrary, technology and innovative uses of AI can protect children at scale. Ladies and gentlemen, while sexual abuse and exploitation of children online has been a hidden problem of major proportions for some time, it is now exploding. This week, Interpol issued a new report that hammers this point home. Just imagine that in a little bit more than in a decade, we went from 100,000 images reported in 2008, images of child sexual abuse material, to 70 million images. And guess what? Most of them now are also videos. And this is just in the United States alone. And if you and I do nothing, this will be only the beginning. Why? For one thing, consider this. Today, only half of the world's population is connected. I'm not sure it's 70%. Maybe they have access, but not necessarily can afford to be connected. And the unconnected world includes some of the largest developing countries, where up to 40–50% of their populations are children. Imagine that as we proudly connect the unconnected, we double the number of the vulnerable. And here is another daunting challenge. As hundreds of millions of children gain access to the internet through devices with cameras, and as the perpetrators move to video and live streaming, unless we find ways to stop the perpetrators, the horrific escalation of sexual exploitation will expand like a wildfire. So what can and must be done? First, we need to work together to raise awareness of global and local leaders. This was a major reason why Childhood, together with the Economist Intelligence Unit and Oak Foundation and Carlson Wagoni Travel Foundation, developed the first ever index assessing 60 countries' response to child sexual exploitation and abuse. Launched last year, the index demonstrated that no country is doing enough to protect its children, and that only a few countries have legislation in place to effectively address CSAM online. The Childhood Foundation, which was founded in 1999 by Her Majesty Queen Sylvia of Sweden, was a pioneer in investing in development of technology-based solutions to address child sexual abuse material on computers and now on mobile phones. It was in 2003, and this solution is offered by a company called NetClean that I'm sure many of you are familiar with, and is now being used globally by law enforcement and the private sector. And now Childhood is expanding its investments in new technologies with partners. But much more is needed, ladies and gentlemen. It doesn't require a PhD in mathematics or economics to calculate that there will never be enough human monitors of cyberspace, networks, or social media platforms, nor can there be enough law enforcement agents to investigate these crimes or to rescue children being abused. We have millions of images on one hand, and then only thousands of eyes. I would make the analogy that it would be like trying to extinguish wildfires with even 1 million droplets of water. So we must develop new technological solutions and employ AI in novel ways to quench the spreading flames. In 2018, the United Nations Broadband Commission for Sustainable Development, and I happen to be one of the commissioners, established a working group on child online safety, which I co-chaired together with the CEO of Zain Group, Scott Gegenheimer. Last year, on October 1st, we launched a report on child online safety with actionable recommendations. Let me mention just a few of them. By 2021, which means next year, all nations should implement child safety strategies in the national digital plans. 2, governments, but also private sector must invest in development and deployment of technology-driven solutions for child online safety. And 3, tech companies must make their services safe per design. On November 20th last year, on the 30th anniversary of the UN Convention of the Right of the Child, the King and Queen of Sweden convened at the Royal Palace the first roundtable on artificial intelligence and online child safety, with 40 experts, 20 in artificial intelligence and 20 in child sexual exploitation abuse, including researchers, practitioners, law enforcement agents. It became obvious to all attendees that the few AI tools that have been developed to fight sexual abuse of children are only used by the private sector and law enforcement in a small number of rich countries. We cannot effectively address the global problem affecting so many millions of children without deployment of these tools at scale. Look at the fight against terrorism or extremism online. Look at the power of AI for PR and marketing. What would it require to make the same investments in protecting children? My answer is leadership. Leadership in both governments and the private sector. Dear friends, COVID-19 pandemic uncovered many inequalities in our society. By isolating children, it has increased the risk of child sexual exploitation online and offline. But the pandemic also reminded us of the power of AI for good. Let me give you an example. In New York, a Swedish company, Sana Labs, in partnership with Mount Sinai Hospital and the New York Academy of Sciences, deployed an AI-based learning platform to upskill nurses who were untrained for critical care in the ICUs. What would have normally required 10 weeks of training, in the epicenter of the pandemic, nurses were prepared for the worst of COVID could do to hospitals in just hours, thanks to AI. And the platform could be deployed within literally a couple of weeks. Imagine if a similar AI platform could be used for training all the teachers in child online safety, or all children in mastering the skills of staying safe online, or all parents in how to better protect their children. This year has also seen unprecedented and very promising cooperation among UN agencies and the US Center for Disease Control, NGOs, academia, and the private sector on child online safety. The Global Partnership to End Violence Against Children was joined by new Pathfinder countries, and its fund for research and development of new solutions for child online safety has disbursed additional funding. ITU as partner, including Childhood and Her Majesty Queen Sylvia, launched in June the 2020 ITU Child Online Protection Guidelines. Just last week, Childhood Brazil, with regional UNESCO and ITU offices, launched a Broadband Commission Child Online Safety Report and the Universal Child Online Safety Declaration in Portuguese and Spanish. And on September 18th, the Broadband Commission launched its manifesto, calling for child online safety and supporting the UN Secretary General's roadmap for digital cooperation. But ladies and gentlemen, reports and recommendations are not enough. What we need is new initiatives, new solutions, and especially new investments in innovation and action. We need investments by governments and by the private sector, because the proofs of concept exist to demonstrate that new technological tools and innovation in AI can keep our children safe. So the answer to my opening question, can artificial intelligence save real children, is yes, it can, but only if we all pitch in to make a difference. Ladies and gentlemen, children need you. They need to know you care about them and will protect them. Children are everybody's business and the future of our nations. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Joanna, for this very informative and inspiring keynote speak. We're really glad to have you as a keynote speaker, and very happy to have you involved in these activities. As you rightly mentioned, recommendations are great, leadership is great, but reports and recommendations are not enough. Real actions are necessary to be taken, and one of these real actions which UNICRI is taking together with the Ministry of Interior of United Arab Emirates. We're launching a project on how artificial intelligence can combat sexual abuse of children online, and this project is envisaging developing of direct and specific AI applications which would be used by the law enforcement agencies. We have a specialized session on this particular topic at our global UNICRI Interpol AI for law enforcement meeting later in November, where we're going to examine real applications and hosting countries which are going to adopt these applications to combat this problem and this growing problem. Therefore, we would be inviting you, Joanna, to in our work and your foundation, and it is really admiring how you're working closely with Her Majesty Queen Sylvia of Sweden, and we'll be definitely utilizing your expertise and asking to support us and participate in further activities to develop real tools and to develop real actions, as you rightly said in your keynote. Now, our panelists are, and not in any particular sequence, Maria Manojlovic, Strategy and Innovation Advisor, Child Online Safety Lead at the End Violence Partnership and the Fund, Yalda Akur, President of the Bracket Foundation, John Tanago, Director of End OSEC Center, International Justice Mission, Abdulrahman Ahmed Al-Tamimi is the director of the Child Protection Center at the Ministry of Interior of United Arab Emirates. As I said, we have a very diversified panel and a lot of key stakeholders participating in this discussion. Now, my first question actually to kick off this panel discussion is that, of course, we've heard a lot from Joanna and a little bit from myself as well, how AI can contribute to finding solution to this problem. But of course, a lot of our participants may not be fully aware or not have technical knowledge how AI can do it. So perhaps panelists can have a brief thoughts on how artificial intelligence can contribute in finding solutions for this problem. And at the same time, is AI really the only way, or there is a lot more needed? Is AI a silver bullet? So let's kick off the discussion. Maybe Maria Manojlovic. Maria, you can actually start giving your thoughts on this. Maria, thank you.
Thank you, Irakli, so much. And I will try to really not repeat what you and Joanna have really articulately said at the beginning. But I just want to kind of like ask all the participants of this event to kind of think about how much data do you produce? How much data you produce every time you are on your phone, on your computer, and how much of that data is really unstructured. So we're not speaking here about, like the things that we were discussing, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago when you have an Excel sheet with, different categories of data that are really nicely structured and you can access it and, visualize it and think about it as a human being with a little bit of help of the computer, how to use it. We are here talking about that the world's data today is 80% of that data is unstructured. And human brain and human capability to kind of make sense out of it is reducing, diminishing. So that's where AI comes in many areas of human development, of human being, of human, education, employment, and so on. But on the other hand, when you think about that amount of unstructured data, think about also the harms and the issues that children can face online. And both you and Joanna have spoken about some of those things, but think about the enormous explosion of child online abuse material that has happened over the last decade. You were speaking about the fact that 10 years ago, it was annually 1 million images and videos of child abuse identified online. And this is only speaking about open web and speaking about detected images and videos. Nowadays, NICMEC, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children in US, identifies 70 million annually. And this has even become worse. We are looking into seeing what the data will show in 2020 because of COVID pandemic. They're identifying 70 million pieces of child abuse imagery and videos online every year. So we are speaking here about how do you actually at scale identify and find and classify and use this information, this data to identify and help actual children and victims. How do you find them? So I will speak a little bit about where do we see the best application of AI in this area, but also where are the kind of like obstacles to greater efficiency and effectiveness of these tools as we are all as a community trying to scale them. So the way that we have structured and End Violence, how we approach technology in this area is by the objectives that we want to tackle. So here we are speaking about detecting and removing and referring the known and new child abuse material that is being produced every day. And here artificial intelligence is being used to detect, classify, and refer the known material. It is increasingly being used to identify clues and find new child abuse material that is being produced, which is really important because sometimes images from 10 years ago are circulating on the open web. You want to know whether that victim and that child has been found and rescued, and where the children who are currently being abused, raped, and exploited, and find them as soon as you can and rescue them from these situations. But you also want to remove the child abuse material. So that's one of the uses of artificial intelligence in this sense. We're also thinking about detecting conversations and behaviors that may indicate that the new material is being shared. So you're looking into natural language processing techniques, you're looking into corpus linguistics, understanding how the discourse and behaviors and exchanges of textual information are indicating whether the new or known child abuse material is being shared. We're also talking about preventing grooming and sextortion of children. And I think one of the things that people don't think about now is how fast children are being groomed and kind of induced to sharing their sensitive images and nudes with people they don't know online. This was before weeks of grooming and talking to a child before building that trust relationship. Now these things happen in a matter of hours. And we need to find a way to detect this behavior on the platforms. And AI, again, is helping us analyze these clues. We're also talking about prevention of live streaming. How do we actually, and this is one of the weakest links in the current system, is that there's not many tools that are being effective in the identification of live streaming of child abuse. And this is on the rise. And I'm sure that John from IJM will definitely speak about this, and specifically in the Philippines, where this is a big issue. Here we are using to identify, AI is being used to identify financial transactions, to look into the linguistic and text-based analysis of the chat rooms as the live streaming is happening, to identify the behaviors that indicate abuse. We're also talking about use of AI to support victims with chatbots that are AI powered to support victims and potentially prevent victimization before it happens. I want to say that these are all potential and really promising applications of AI, and they're already being used at different scales in different parts of the world. But there are huge obstacles in terms of collaboration between different actors who are using AI, in terms of regulation. And somebody, I think, in the Q&A window has asked a question about new EU legislation that is potentially preventing the use of AI to identify and classify child abuse material by industry. Basically, the new legislation is going to make the use of these tools illegal by industry and companies. And I think what we can do is write to your members of the parliament in EU, talk to them and explain why it is important that we can still keep on using the tools that we are using to identify these materials, because otherwise we will lose the ability to find the victims who are currently being abused and children and save them from these situations that are horrific. So find a way to influence these debates and work with the government and your representatives to kind of raise awareness about these issues. And at the end, human capacity is critical. And we are seeing huge differences between capacities in the global north and the global south. And I think that's why AI is not a silver bullet unless we are able to equalize access to this technology and capacities to use it and collaboration to make it more effective. Ultimately, we need funds and we need more investments in this area. So I think I will stop here and let others also come in.
Thanks a lot, Maria. Fully agree with so many interesting ideas and solutions which you've offered already in the discussion. I'm going to jump directly to John Tanago, who is going to speak more specifically even to the AI-related solutions. John, you wanted to share slides, which you are absolutely welcome to do, and you can walk us through that with your answer.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Irakli. So yeah, my name is John Tanego, and I'm the director for the International Justice Mission Center to End Online Sexual Exploitation of Children. If you don't know about International Justice Mission, we're a global NGO that protects people from violence by strengthening justice systems, in particular in the developing world. And we've been doing that for 23 years. And we've seen that when you strengthen justice systems to reliably replace impunity with accountability, you can actually protect people from violence by creating a deterrence. So I think, to answer your question, Irakli, is there a silver bullet? I say no. I think we have to work hand in hand. Governments that are strengthening their justice systems and rule of law, industry that's creating artificial intelligence that can detect and block child sexual abuse materials. Working hand in hand, we can make a significant impact to end these online crimes against children. And in the Philippines, for the last 5 years, IJM has partnered with the Philippine government to protect children from being sexually abused in live streams. And these live streams are commercially produced by traffickers here. They're sold to sex offenders around the world. But so far, we've seen a lot of hope. Close to 700 victims have been rescued and 250 suspects arrested. So I believe that the strengthening justice systems is critical, but I also believe that AI plays a really important role to protect children. And so I do want to just share a few slides here with you. So hopefully you can see this. What I am really excited about when it comes to artificial intelligence protecting children is disruption of the creation of child sexual abuse materials on devices. So talking about on-device disruption. So what do I mean by that? So right now there are effective strategies to combat online sexual exploitation of children by targeting child sexual exploitation material offenders, people who are distributing CSAM on the internet. There's technology by Thorn, there's technology by Two Hat, to detect new child sexual abuse materials. But few, if any, tech solutions that I'm aware of exist to disrupt the creation of CSAM at its source. And that is at the camera, the first instance when child sexual abuse materials are created. And so this slide, for people who are just beginning to understand what is online sexual exploitation of children, essentially you have traffickers or sex offenders who are abusing children to create new photos, videos, and live streams, or what we call child sexual exploitation materials. What's common is that they're using camera-equipped electronic devices, usually smartphones, sometimes laptops or regular cameras. And then of course, they're sharing those materials on the internet through social networking and communication platforms where they're connecting with other offenders. Those offenders are also receiving those materials via devices, right? And then you have internet service providers who are providing the connectivity. So once an image or a video or a live stream has already been created and shared, the abuse or exploitation has already occurred. So imagine that the best place, the earliest place we could use AI is to disrupt on device, the devices that are used to capture or broadcast new child sexual exploitation materials. Because there are offenders around the world who are sexually abusing children for the express purpose of creating new materials. And so if we're able to detect and block that at the camera level, then they lose the purpose of abusing those children. They're doing it to create money, or they're doing it to share with other offenders. So what I'm most excited about is children being protected as on-device artificial intelligence automatically disables the capture or broadcast functionality of a camera upon detecting explicit content in the camera's field of view. And so one thing I actually wanted to say is, this is not just a theory, but there's actually an organization right now based in the UK called SafeToNet that is developing, and they've been in the news, they're developing artificial intelligence technology that can detect and block live streams of child sexual exploitation and other harms. And so imagine on-device technology that protects children. For me, that's just so incredibly exciting because, imagine a world where, no camera can be pointed at a child and can capture or broadcast that crime scene of a child being sexually abused or exploited. Imagine every device, every app, every operating system having AI tools built in so that when somebody tries to stream child sexual abuse or tries to take a photo or a video, the camera recognizes that for what it is. It's contraband, it's illegal material. No one has a legal right or a privacy interest in creating that material in the first instance. And so I'm really excited about that. And I think using AI alongside all the other things we're doing, strengthening justice systems, improving rule of law, creating education systems, all of these things together can work to end online sexual exploitation of children.
John, thank you so much. It was really amazing presentation, and this is the type of solutions which we at UNICRI, together with our partners in Interpol and with other stakeholders, would like to promote to the countries. This is the type of solutions what we would like to see implemented directly at the legislation or at the practical level, that no one ever be able to actually do it at the inception level. And this is something we'll be definitely inviting you to our workshops and our deliberations in the continuation of the development of these solutions. Now I go to Yalda Akur, who is a fantastic champion of this issue as well. Yalda last year championed a specialized study and a report which was widely shared later on, and we joined hand in hand with Yalda, with the Bracket Foundation, signing an MOU with UNICRI and starting working together to find type of technology solutions, type of the AI related solutions which will contribute in combating sexual abuse of children. Yalda, please, floor is yours.
Well, first of all, thank you, Irakli, for having me on this panel, and thank you to our cohort for the incredible work you are all doing to make the internet safer for our kids. Irakli, I wanted to take a step back and start with a very simple anecdote on how AI and machine learning work for the people in our audience who aren't very familiar with AI, pretty much like me a couple of years ago. I believe we're all familiar with security cameras. We see them on the streets and shops, on the roads. Let's say you want to teach a CCTV camera to recognize a car accident on the highway. And before anyone has had time to call for help, the CCTV has already identified the car accident, alerted first responders, and help is already on its way. How do you do that using AI? You gather all the data you can on car accidents. You feed these images into an algorithm by hashing them, effectively giving them a code. You label them until that software is educated enough to recognize what a car accident looks like. You then upload that software onto your hardware, in this instance, the CCTV, which automates the alert whenever there's an accident. Over time, the machine gets smarter and smarter, and the accuracy rate stronger until it gives you near perfect result. And this is a perfect example of AI and machine learning. This is what AI can do with online abuse of children. But instead of identifying a car accident on a highway and taking action, it identifies child sexual exploitation on the internet and takes action. There are many great examples on how AI can combat online sexual abuse of children. Many were already mentioned here, but I personally think that AI is exceptionally well suited for law enforcement agencies. As our colleagues mentioned, and Brackett's Foundation white paper on how AI can combat sexual exploitation of children revealed, the amount of CSAM online has increased 6,000 folds in the last 2 decades, leaving law enforcement agencies crippled under the amount of reports they receive and creating a very heavy psychological toll on people reviewing this material. This is where using image recognition software, as described in our anecdote, becomes critical. AI can do many other things. It can help law enforcement agencies make sense of the insurmountable amount of data out there, as mentioned by Maria. It can facilitate tracking of perpetrators and their transactions Using data analytics, it can help with the identification of victims through image recognition. It can preempt online grooming and sextortion on a live basis using AI-enabled chatbots. NLP, for example, neurolinguistic programming, can intercept explicit words in conversations on a gaming website, which have become, I think we can all agree, a breeding ground for predators, and then warn users that they're about to commit a crime by sending an explicit message to underage user. SafetyNet, which was just mentioned earlier, has actually embedded a software that teaches messaging apps to recognize emotions and alert parents if a child expresses distress. Therefore, you're not infringing on a child's right to privacy while simultaneously protecting them. That said, and in answer to your question, Irakli, AI is a means to an end, is the means to an end and not a silver bullet in itself. Protecting against the threat of online sexual abuse of children is an issue that requires first and foremost, and I echo here the words of my colleagues on the panel, a global response, including collaboration between governments and the tech industry, collaboration between advocacy groups, educators and civil society. It requires major funding solutions. And lastly, and most importantly, a robust, effective, and enforceable legal framework that condemns and prosecutes these crimes while protecting a child's rights to privacy.
Thank you, Yalda, very much. Thank you for your work and thank you for your thoughts. We're looking forward to engage you in a lot more, obviously, in our work. That's what we are planning to do. Thanks for this inspiration, which you are giving to a lot of people to be engaged, to find solutions, AI and others, to combat these horrendous crimes. Now, with this, I'm going to our colleague from the United Arab Emirates, Abdulrahman Ahmed Al-Tamimi, who is the director of the Child Protection Center at the Ministry of Interior. The United Arab Emirates is one of the most progressive, one of the most technologically advanced country who has the Minister of Artificial Intelligence in place and using many of the cutting edge AI or other related solutions to fight different type of crimes or to find to contribute for many different other solutions in different fields. Abdulrahman, please tell us how you are viewing the AI solutions for this particular problem. And obviously, we are partnering to implement a very interesting project together, and something we are very grateful of for partnership with you. As Yalda and others were saying, stakeholder cooperation is the only solution to find it. Abdulrahman, floor is yours.
Thank you very, very much, Irakli. First of all, I would like to thank all my fellow panelists. You all spoke about things that I wanted to talk about, so we're all on the same page. I remember in the beginning, Irakli said, if any of you has a wish to challenge any other, please talk up or speak up. But we're all on the same page. We all understand that this is a big challenge and this is a big problem, and it needs to be dealt with. I've met before with a lot of people. When we spoke about a problem, especially a technological problem, then it makes sense that the solution will have a technological aspect to it. Maria touched in the beginning about the size of data, the amount of data that people are generating and they're not even aware of. Every single person is generating huge amounts of data. We in the Ministry of Interior and the Child Protection Center, we are in charge of protecting children from all types of abuse and all types of mistreatment. And some of it, a part of it is online child sexual exploitation. With that comes the huge challenge of dealing with so much data. A lot of data that you have to sort through. So when I'm talking about the perspective of law enforcement, there are like 3 main areas that we can use AI for. It's not a silver bullet, everybody is agreeing on that, but it's a tool to have in the toolbox. We have other tools, but with AI, it will help us a lot. It will reduce the amount of pressure on the human resources working and on the humans who are on the other end of the screens and other ends of the devices who are investigating these issues. So for us as law enforcement, we are focusing on using AI to help investigators and law enforcement in dealing with the huge amounts of data and classifying the new material, if there is new material, in verifying that it is actually child exploitation material. Also investigating these new material and trying to connect victims, perpetrators, places, all these things. Usually, I mean, there are some tools that we use right now. We use hashing, we use photo DNA, we use different other tools, but we are still in need of more. We need more technological help, I guess. So AI being there will reduce the amount of data that has to be processed manually by humans. Because no matter what crawlers you have, no matter what databases you have, at some point a human is going to look at it and they have to say, okay, this is considered as child abuse material in XY country, because classification is different from different countries. So you have to do that, or that part of the verification process, manually by humans. So, and that has a lot of pressure, that causes a lot of pressure on the people mentally, physically, and strains the amount of people that we're going to put under this load and this type of thing and having to deal with this kind of crime. This is one. The second part of using AI for law enforcement purposes is to disrupt criminal activities. So my colleagues, John, he spoke about the disruption on device, which is, I mean, amazing if it's implemented, because it will stop things before happening. But now there are some tools that are trying to figure out or identify child sexual abuse or grooming that's happening in chat rooms, on social media, on maybe video calls and things like that. But we need to improve the technology, and AI can help us doing that. Another challenge with the increased access to internet or to electronic devices by children is the huge amount of information that's being, or data that's being generated by children themselves. Because this is one of the big things that is growing. One of the areas of child exploitation material that's growing all around the world is self-generated images and self-generated material, where the child is taking the pictures and the child is doing the videos for the perpetrator. And this is an issue where you can, the victim is willingly, well, not willingly, is groomed or whatever to do that kind of activity and provide the perpetrator with the material that will be used later on to either be sent to other people, exploit the same child again and again, or shared or sold or whatever. So these are the main things, or the main areas we can use AI to help us with. And our project with UNICRI, and hopefully with the participation of Bracket Foundation, it reflects the importance of AI to the United Arab Emirates. And what we see, that AI could be one of the solutions implemented to help us fight this crime and reduce the amount of harm. Because let me tell you, with time, things will get worse. I mean, so there are, as Joanna said in the beginning, probably, maybe 1/3 of the children in the world that have access, but there's more to come. Internet is accessing different areas that it didn't have. There are countries in Asia and Africa, they are having more internet access than they used to a couple of years back. And thus increasing the number of children that are being targeted and perpetrators have access to. So this issue will get worse, will get bigger with time, and we need to maybe get ahead of time. We need to get ahead of this huge flood of material that's going to be coming our way. And AI hopefully will be able to help us reduce the amount of, or take some of that burden of law enforcement and other entities who are working to fight this kind of crime and the spread of this type of material.
Thank you very much, Abdul Rahman. Thank you very much for the work what you're doing with your center and with the Ministry of Interior for partnership also with us and trying to push this issue ahead of us. A lot has been talked about the stakeholder cooperation. A lot has been talked about that maybe AI is not a silver bullet, although it can be an extremely powerful tool which to make sense of the vast amount of data which Maria and others were talking about, is to help us to get that type of an edge. When we see the statistics, we have accumulated something like 25 zettabyte of data by now, which is an enormous amount of data. And projection is that by 2025, we will have 175 zettabyte of data, which no human being will be able, or group of human beings will be able to simply make sense of. So I will go now with the extra questions to all of you. Actually, John, you've talked about very interesting solutions. At the same time, maybe you can tell us what sort of private-public partnerships is necessary to actually go ahead of this problem, get ahead of us, and what is it that we should be doing as an international community to be even more effective or to be effective in that field?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's definitely going to need very close partnerships between industry, technology companies who can develop artificial intelligence, and governments, in particular law enforcement agencies, who are the only ones who can lawfully possess child sexual abuse materials. Because what needs to happen is the AI tool needs to be trained on large amounts of data sets. Essentially, the AI tool needs to be shown photos and videos of real child sexual abuse so that it learns what the content looks like, right? And so through computer vision and machine or deep learning, the AI tool can be trained to detect CSAM and then block it. But that can only happen if there's a partnership between law enforcement and private industry. Now, there are examples of that. I know of a company, Two Hat Security, that's based in Canada, and they had a collaboration with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and they were able to build a tool that's called Cease AI, and it can detect new child sexual abuse material. So I think we need to see more partnership between government and industry to build strong AI tools, especially when you think about just the reality is child sexual abuse material content looks different depending on the country, depending on the age, depending on the category. And so to make an AI tool more accurate, it needs a very robust and diverse data set. Now that's going to happen when you get the Interpols involved, when you get the Australian Center to Counter Child Exploitation involved, Homeland Security investigations out of the US. So these agencies that possess a significant amount of child sexual abuse material as part of their cases or investigations. This is a really important thing that can't be downplayed. And I've seen questions about this in the Q&A. Industry can't do this alone. They really need good partnerships with government, in particular with law enforcement. And I would say that governments and law enforcement should jump at that opportunity, make sure that there's proper safeguards, but I think it's a really smart win-win.
Thanks a lot, John. Fully agree with you. Industry cannot do it alone. Governments cannot do it alone. What we need is a good cooperation between industry, governments, academia, law enforcement, and others. That's what we are trying to do through the project, which I already mentioned. We're bringing all related stakeholders. Next session, we're going to do it together with Interpol at our AI for Law Enforcement Global meeting, where we're going to invite the technology providers. We're going to invite the law enforcement agencies. We already are in initial discussions with the number of law enforcement agencies who expressed the cooperation. Data would be vital, of course, but also the AI-related solutions and also the legislations and other type of undertakings which governments would need to produce. Now I'll go slightly sort of to the direction with Yalda with the question about how has the rise of technology contributed to the crisis itself, and what steps are big tech companies or other private sector initiatives taking to address the problem? Yalda, please.
Thank you, Irakli, for this very important question. Technology has allowed the rampant proliferation of online sexual abuse of children. Technology and most big tech platforms are not only responsible for hosting these perpetrators and their crimes, but they're responsible for providing them with the necessary infrastructure that allows them to thrive. So let's do a quick scan to see what we're up against. Microsoft and Google have given us low-cost platforms which predators use unchecked for the peer-to-peer sharing of CSAM. Apple has given us heavily encrypted broadcasting studios, which we carry in our pockets, which predators use to freely, instantaneously, illegally live stream abuse being committed against minors. Facebook Messenger has strengthened, and I believe this was mentioned in one of the QIA, and not weakened end-to-end user encryption, allowing perpetrators to remain anonymous. YouTube, Snapchat have enabled for the creation of online communities where criminals can connect with peers and share best practices for their crimes, and these chat rooms are seldom shut down, benefiting from the protection of outdated laws like Section 230 of the Communications and Decency Act. And meanwhile, law enforcement agencies worldwide, as we discussed, are so swamped by the volume of data, they're having to prioritize resources by allocating the bulk of their resources to younger and younger victims. Broadcasters have strict rules and reliability when it comes to the content that they publish, and there are very real economic and legal ramifications to those who break the law. Yet the same regulatory standards are not being applied to the big tech firms, which act with impunity over the toxic content that they release on our online ecosystem. Facebook Messenger was responsible last year for nearly 14 million reports of CSAM. Instead of introducing software that could track these crimes, Facebook moved towards full encryption of Messenger, providing yet another safe haven for perpetrators. Apple does the same. It does not scan its cloud storage, and it encrypts its messaging app, making detection virtually impossible. Dropbox, Google, and Microsoft's consumer products scan for illegal images only when someone shares them, not when they are uploaded. Tumblr has often provided slow and equivocal responses to law enforcement agencies about its behaviors, about its users' behavior. Some efforts are being made, but largely insufficient compared to the size of the problem. And it's primarily small companies with not even a fraction of the market cap of big tech who are taking the lead, many of which have been mentioned today, companies like NetClean, NGOs like Thorn that have developed tools that can be deployed with employers to identify, remove, and report CSAM in the workplace. Microsoft has made a small first step with PhotoDNA, which is a database of CSAM hashes. TikTok has just recently announced its commitment to collaborate with governments and strengthen their policies and technologies related to online sexual exploitation of children. However, big tech needs to step up much more. It needs to be held accountable, allocate the appropriate resources to develop the tools and solutions needed, and work closer with law enforcement, as mentioned, to combat this issue. And as a mother of 2 young children, at a time where much of learning has moved online, where our kids are spending more time connected, not less, I can't wait to see the day when a mobile device or tablet is sold to me with the appropriate child safety software solution and a user manual on how to keep my children safe, rather than leave us parents second guessing on how much danger and crime we're subjecting our kids to whenever we leave them online. Thank you.
Thank you, Yalda, very much. I fully subscribe to your words and passion as a father of 2 children myself here. And one of the questions actually in the chat room was that why we are not talking, or why we're not obliging the mobile phone manufacturers to put AI detectors on the phones they are selling. Very simple but very straightforward question. I wish that we had representatives of the big tech companies here. We will be definitely involving them in our work and encouraging them to do a lot more with this, for example, to implement the solutions what John was presenting earlier on during the panel discussion. I go now to Abdul Rahman with a specific question. What are the challenges law enforcement is actually facing at the moment to implement the type of solutions, to interpret the type of data, and how are you tackling this?
Okay. Well, for law enforcement dealing with the online child sexual exploitation, the biggest problem will be, number one, the size of the data. That's huge. It's just so much. I don't think there's any country in the world that's equipped to deal with all the information that they're getting, at least, even from NICMIC, at least. So we're talking about NICMIC. I don't think any country can follow up on all the tips that they're getting, because there's so much to sift through. That's one. Number two, we're having a problem with the technology company. As Yelda said, that's a big challenge. It's always, we've had them in meetings, we dealt with them, we spoke to them in multiple occasions, multiple platforms. We always discuss things, but it's always, it's the bottom line for, companies. It's what they can do, what they can get away with. So for US-based companies, big companies, they are required by law to report things to NICMIC. So what they do is they just report everything. For example, I'll give you an example. Facebook, as Yalda said, 14 million tips last year. But what they do is they report it and then they shut down the account, for example. So which makes it very difficult for us to investigate anything. Instead of suspending the account so we can access the information, whatever, no, they will report it and they will shut it down. So it's like doing nothing. It's like just closing that channel where the perpetrator can go somewhere else and commit that crime again. And it's happening with everybody. So the amount of data that they're sending is huge, but mostly it's unreliable. The hash sets and the databases they use to compare whatever material that comes on their websites or their platforms is not the one that's used by law enforcement, or some of it is, but not all. So what we get is low quality reports. Not all the time. Sometimes we will be able to deal with them, but sometimes it's just very low quality, and then most of the information will be deleted, and they will have their own regulation about how much time they keep information and so on. So it's always about the size of data and the compliance of the technology companies. We need stricter regulations. So for us, Yalda just spoke about the day where you're going to have a phone that has safeguards for children, whatever. We have spoken about that and discussed it here in my country with the proper authorities, where we said we want to implement this kind of thing on companies. But they said, okay, you have to look at the size of the market and the power of the country that's implying that or implementing that kind of thing on the company. So for US companies, you will not, as another country that's not the US, you will not be able to put any regulations or force them to do anything that's not backed up by some kind of federal law in the US. And the same with other countries. So that is a big issue. But having the AI, hopefully it will help us maybe just look around and try to find out where the problems are and how we can stop things at the source before they start spreading, getting on platforms that we might not have access to, platforms that will be protected by privacy laws, platforms that will be just blocked from us, where we cannot access enough information for whatever reason. And all companies will say, we will help you as law enforcement, will provide you with information, provide you with all the data you need. Just send us a request. And they will tell you, okay, you have to wait for 30 days or 15 days, 45 days. By that time, the perpetrator has finished with this victim, moved on to another victim or multiple victims. So it's always with that. So they hold a part of it. And regulation is very important. Laws and legislation is very important to help us, dealing with these companies and using the technological solutions such as AI and other tools we have. Hopefully, it will help us deal with the issue. But with time, and the size of data that we're seeing coming in every day, if there isn't something that will help us reduce the amount of time we're spending on this kind of data, we will be swamped, probably buried under this amount of information. It will be really difficult as time goes by if we don't have something that will help us.
Thank you very much, Abdul Rahman. We clearly understand your challenges as well related to data, legislation, timings, and other things. That's why we do what we do, to create the international community awareness and the network, which we could try to see how we can facilitate the finding the AI-related solutions to help you in time. Otherwise, we are accumulating more and more data. Data is going to grow, and the problem is going to remain. More connectivity grows, more children will be online, and of course, the problem will amplify as well. With this, Maria, now question to you, that last year you've launched a $13 million open call for technology solutions and tools to tackle online child sexual exploitation and abuse. And I know that next week you will make a big announcement of the winners of the call. Obviously, I'm sure that you cannot tell us who winners are, or maybe you can, I don't know. But what I hope you can tell us is that what do you learn throughout this process? Who are the players working on AI solutions? Where are the gaps? And where we can do, or how we can do better to ensure that AI-based tools are working to protect children in digital environment, and how we can, of course, benefit from all of this through our project, through our global undertaking that who we should be involving in our work. Maria, thank you for your work once again.
Thank you, Irakli. And no, unfortunately, I can't still announce the winners because my comms team would kill me. But on the 14th of
We will
October,
not tell anyone.
yeah, oh, no, nobody's here. So on 14th of October, you can watch our social media and our website where you will see all the information about the winners of the call. So for those who don't know, maybe just like a step back, the Global Partnership and the Fund to End Violence Against Children make investments in solutions, programs, interventions, and tools, specifically technology tools, to tackle online child abuse and exploitation. And so far, we have made around 50 million of investments across the world, in every region of the world, to build national, regional, and global capacity for the response and prevention of abuse and harms to children online. So with the latest funding round, what we have decided is, let's look at, now that we have some basis across the world, countries are slowly adopting legislation and policies in this area. We slowly have collaborations emerging, and people starting to collaborate and share information and kind of like work together around issues of keeping children safe online. But we thought, let's see what types of tools, technology tools, we can design, leverage, and scale to make sure that everybody has access to them. And again, one of the biggest gaps that we have seen in this space is the fact that, you know, everybody says future is already here, but it's not equally distributed. So future is already here in the north or in few countries, and they already have the tools and collaborations they need to attack these issues, at least to a certain degree. Nobody's perfect, but in some places there is nothing. And as you know, when Abdul Rahman was speaking about the challenges of law enforcement, we are hearing the same stories everywhere. The way that you're receiving the data, the way you're processing it, the way you're using it is just not sufficiently organized, and there are no labeling protocols that are standardized, that there are no ways of collaborating that can really, you know, push the envelope further. So we have decided to invest in 4 areas. We have decided to invest in tools that are used to detect, remove, and report child abuse material, to invest in tools that are used to block adults' access to children on digital platforms, primarily thinking about grooming, to stop live streaming, identify and stop live streaming of child abuse, and prevent online sexual abuse of children before it happens. So looking into what are kind of like the strategies that children can use themselves to protect themselves. And the call was lasting over a period of several months, and we have received really diverse range, applications from diverse range of players from all over the world and from different sectors, from academia, research institutes, CSOs, international organizations, and so on. And all of them were working in 3 areas: enhancing existing technology solutions, exploring new ones, or building collaborative environments like sandbox spaces where people can come together to understand and build the tools where the gaps exist globally. So what we have seen is there is tons going on in the area of identifying and removing the known child abuse material. Everybody's working here. Everybody wants to kind of improve the tools that we already have, that began with photo DNA and that are now being used in many places. But they're just improving upon the existing solutions. They're not coming up with new areas that I will speak about that are also emerging that we need to be thinking about going forward. But again, this is a good development. At the same time, there is a small danger of overlap and duplication of work that we really should be trying to avoid. The second thing is that a lot of the work is happening in analysis of the text to prevent grooming of children. Again, I think I answered this question in Q&A, is that a lot of this work is actually working on the historical chats. So they're not working to identify real-time abuse and real-time grooming as it happens. It's mostly used for policing and evidencing. Once you have downloaded the chat logs and stuff like that, then you can identify whether the grooming was happening or not. Again, the gaps here are the issue that it's not real time, but also language barriers and context-specific barriers. So like the data sets that these people are using to train their AI models, believe it or not, one organization is using MySpace chat logs. And I don't know how many people in this call remember MySpace. So that was fairly long time ago. So it's not really like super up to date. And then we also have the work around prevention and deterrence of online CSCA. And here we are using technology and investing in technology to primarily AI-powered chatbots to kind of support children to build resiliency and kind of like be able to recognize grooming before or as it's happening, and then they can protect themselves from these attempts of adults to sextort them or get their images and then abuse them later on, potentially even physically. What are the biggest gaps that we have seen? we have seen that not many people are working on open source tools, number one. It's all licensed, it's all closed source, people are not sharing information and people are not sharing data sets. There is no agreement, there are no standards. So a lot of the amazing tools that people are developing are not being leveraged because they're not being shared. We have also seen the need to promote collaboration, to build capacity for its use. Again, many tools exist, but when you go to specific places and contexts and countries, they don't have anything. The governments haven't invested any money in the overall response. The legislation is not there, the capacity is not there. Law enforcement doesn't even have units who can address this issue at all, let alone victim support services and other services that are needed. We also have seen there is need to localize and adapt existing solutions. So far, a lot of the things are working on English language, they're working for white people, they're working for advanced countries, but they're not working for everyone. And it's localizing solutions and adapting them to specific cultural and language context will be critical. And I just want to mention something that Joanna keeps on saying, we need real money. There needs to be a real investment. Like, we are not speaking here about like, let's hold hands and work together. There needs to be real investment in this issue from governments in their own countries, in collaboration, in organizations who are working in this space to support the work that is great work that is being done on the field to support children. And I want to finish by saying that the leadership is critical. And UN Secretary General has announced a couple of months ago his roadmap for digital cooperation, where he identifies tackling online CSCA as one of the critical areas of digital collaboration among nations and sectors. And we really need to stand up to that. We really need to stand up to that, both in terms of resources, investments, and tools that we are developing in this area. And that's one of the things that End Violence is really trying to do with partners, such as the partners on this call, but also partners such as We Protect Global Alliance and others, where we are working together to address this issue, especially in the time of COVID, but also beyond. I'll stop here. Over to you.
Thank you, Maria, for your comprehensive answer and for comprehensive insights, which actually people hearing it from the first source about the competition, about the solutions, about the gaps, and about the analysis which you've been making along the way. This is certainly going to help international community, and it is going to help us as well. And I'm looking forward to involving you in our work, in our multi-year project to contribute to this. And I really thank you for your availability and for the availability of the End Violence and the fund which you are leading there. Now, what we're going to do is that we have around 15 to 20 minutes left. We're going to smoothly going into and pick up some questions from the audience, from the question and answer. We have a lot of questions. It was hard for me to monitor through, plus listening to your discussions, but I see a lot of questions here. I'm going to try to pick out few, and the rest of it will be available to the panelists, and we try to maybe combine a written answers to all of you and make it available through AI for Good Summit at the website or directly to the audience. Now, there was one about how do we align and allow developing countries to actually achieve must-do attitude when they don't have basics in place. Very deep question. Probably a lot of problems is at the developing country or within the developing countries. Resources are scarce and hard for the law enforcement agencies there to tackle it. Probably more international collaboration is needed. But John, maybe you can actually give us some insights on what do we do at the level of developing countries and what is needed and what sort of solutions we need to be feeding into.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to do that. I mean, this is a global crime and you have offenders all over the world. So in one case, you can have victims in a developing world country. You could have offenders in that country who are abusing the child, but you could also have offenders, you know, around the world, in the US and Australia, in the UK, in other parts of the world. And so international law enforcement collaboration is critical to uncover these cases and to support law enforcement in gathering enough evidence to arrest and prosecute offenders in their country and to protect children and safeguard them. So the sharing of referrals by law enforcement agencies around the world is critical. We've seen that be very effective in the Philippines. we recently published a study that showed 64% of the cases that the Philippine government were able to successfully move to a rescue operation or arrest suspects here in the Philippines. 64% of those cases started because of a foreign law enforcement referral. And so IJM has supported the Philippine government alongside the UK's National Crime Agency and the Australian Federal Police in launching an Internet Crimes Against Children Center in the Philippines for that specific purpose. And so not only are referrals being shared, but that's where local law enforcement can receive contextualized capacity building, training that is very focused on developing their skills to do these sometimes complex investigations. And so that's what IJM has been doing. We've been working alongside Philippine government agencies and law enforcement units. So I think there has to be a collaboration where we come alongside justice systems that are under-resourced, still developing. They don't have the tools or the skills needed, and we help capacitate them so that they can combat this crime. There are other examples of that around the world, and I think that is really, really critical for international development agencies to be thinking about, or for governments to be thinking about when they're going to make, when they're going to use their development dollars, not only for education and healthcare and clean water, but also for strengthening rule of law and strengthening the capacity of local law enforcement to conduct these investigations. Because ultimately, you have to have law enforcement in that country to enforce their domestic laws. But it's absolutely possible, and it can happen through more collaboration.
Thanks a lot, John. I'm reading another question. Yalda made an excellent point on the responsibility of the world large platforms. How can they step up their game to combat CSAM, and how can they be held truly accountable? Can UNICRI help coordinate a pledge from the big tech? I mean, from the UNICRI side, I can say that certainly in our activities, we are going to involve as much as possible every big stakeholder and particularly big companies, and we can see how we can get the pledge going. And on the Yalda side, please, Yalda, maybe you can give the insight.
Absolutely, Iraqi, and we look forward to working with you on Project Cleanup. In response to that question, I just wanted to add that obviously there are a lot of lobbying has to be conducted to get big tech's buy-in into addressing this issue. And the incentive scheme, I think when it comes to certain law enforcement agencies, has to change as well. I wanted to give one example of an AI platform in the US called ChildSafe AI that had developed the world's first AI platform capable of observing millions of conversations and intercepting them from child abuse content using chatbots that we discussed, particularly when a transaction was about to happen between a buyer of sex from minors and a seller that was about to occur. However, tech firms like ChildSafe AI face a challenging environment, especially regarding the adoption of their solution by law enforcement agencies, especially in the US and big tech platforms. Because, for example, in the US, law enforcement agencies, police department are actually rated on the amount of arrests that they conduct. So obviously incentivizing them to reduce that amount of arrests, and this is what this type of platform does, is counterintuitive to their business model. So obviously a lot needs to change in terms of incentive schemes, laws and regulations, lobbying, etc.
Now, there was a question about at which level do you think the solutions you propose should be regulated, national, regional, or international, considering the different understanding of an interpretation of the evolving capacities of the children principles and related concepts to it if we leave aside the material that would be classified CSAM. In general, I would address that to Joanna, but also Joanna, being our keynote speaker, can reflect on all discussions which been taking place as well. Joanna, maybe you can give us your insights reflecting on the conversations what we had with the panel and afterwards with the Q&A.
I have to say this was really very promising conversation, which once again showed that there already exists a number of solutions, but that these solutions are not deployed at scale. I would still go back to funding. I think that we need to better understand the macroeconomics of child sexual abuse and exploitation online in order to also better understand and incentivize the private sector to be part of solution. As has been mentioned by Yalda and all of you, technology is an enabler. And I think there is enough of recommendations from all the different global meetings and Secretary General and ITU and everybody else that we need to do something about the problem. There are some of them are very specific that the platforms need to be safe, but that doesn't happen. And I think the issue is that we still lack this global leadership and global conversation about this problem. Naturally, I think, yes, governments have to lead, and we have seen with the Economist Index that the countries that are doing best in their response to child sexual abuse, online or offline, are the countries where the governments are more engaged. And I think there's a movement, we see some of the countries now to really investing in online child protection. But at the end of the day, it's not the government that invests in infrastructure and in technology that is driving those global challenges that we are facing and children are facing today. These are the private companies. Some of them are huge, and we mentioned a few of them, but there is a lot of small companies that would never be able to afford to make huge investment in developing new solutions. So there has to be a better way, that there is a global consensus that there has to be a real fund, and Violence Partnership is an amazing start of such a fund, but it really needs more money. And I'm not sure that the money should be coming from governments. I feel that the private sector plays a very important role, because remember, these companies are not bound by boundaries, physical boundaries. They are everywhere. They profit from being everywhere. And they haven't been designing their tools to abuse children, but unfortunately, that's a consequence of what these tools can or cannot do today. So I do believe that it is about leadership and it is about investment. And I do think that a lot of companies need and want to do better, but they haven't still identified this common voice and what that better means and how much money invested in actually making the real difference.
Thank you very much, Joanna, for your input as well. There are many questions in the Q&A. Some are extremely specific, some are general. What we will do is that we will collect the questions and we will distribute it to the panelists, and to the possible extent possible, we will try to answer them in writing. To conclude the panel and discussion, what I would like to ask each one of you, maybe you can identify 2-3 keywords, literally just words or sort of concepts, that something which is really actionable and something which is needed and something we can take it forward when we will be discussing, at least from the UNICRI side, together with our partners in Interpol, Ministry of Interior, United Arab Emirates, Bracket Foundation and other partners, that we can sort of make that actionable. Maybe we can start with you, Maria, a couple of just words, concepts, concluding sort of reflections from your side, and I will ask the same to all of you before we wrap up the session.
Try to be less elaborate this time. So I will say accountability, collaboration, and accountability, collaboration, and sharing, and investment. And I think that those are the 3 things that need to come through for AI and technology to be used for the right purposes, but also all of that under the right level of leadership from industry, from governments, and from all of us in this area of work to keep children safe online. Over to you.
Maria had an unfair advantage of being first here. If others would like to repeat the same, I mean, what Maria said certainly applies, and you cannot challenge that. But if you want to add something, please do so. Abdul Rahman, to you.
Okay, for me, it's, well, Maria touched some of it, but For us as law enforcement, we are looking forward to more participation and commitment from big tech, because they are a big part of the problem. They can be a big part of the solution. They have their own systems, they have their own AIs, they have their own algorithms that they use to exploit people and make money off people. They can use some of that power to help us fight this kind of crime. The second will be governments needs more to be taking more or stronger action, because companies cannot exist in a void. They are regulated and they have to follow rules. If they don't, they get shut down. But if countries are not taking that action, they're not strong in their legislation, that will be a problem. So stronger commitment from tech and stronger action from governments.
Thank you, Abdul Rahman. Joanna, would you like to add anything here?
Just one gap, which I think was mentioned a couple of times, and because we're talking about AI, if we just could find a better way of sharing the data, and most of the data resides within the companies, that would be already an incredible way of accelerating development of new solutions.
Amazing, definitely. Yalda?
Absolutely. So I'll say my 3 words are data, child safety, 2 words, and accountability. And I think the UNICRI UAE project that you've announced is actually a perfect example of action-driven collaboration between the private, public, and multilateral agencies.
Thank you, Yalda. Looking forward to working on this. And John, I think you are the last one here.
My 2 words are accountability and hope. I think ultimately we have to see governments own the work of protecting people from violence. That ultimately is the responsibility of individual governments. And so they have to hold offenders and perpetrators accountable consistently. And right now, when you look at the crime of online sexual abuse of children, generally speaking, there's impunity for these crimes. Only a very small tip of the iceberg of offenders are being arrested and prosecuted. And then the second word I would say is hope. There's actually so much hope for children when they are protected from these kinds of crimes. In IJM's experience in the Philippines, where we've helped the government rescue over 700 victims of online sexual exploitation of children, when they receive quality rehabilitation and aftercare services, they are restored, they are rehabilitated, they can go on to live their lives in freedom. And so ultimately, I think we have to have hope, and we have to be motivated by hope, not by cynicism or by fear, but really that change is possible. And with all of us working together with governments and industry, we can actually make this world much, much safer for children. I'm a dad, and I've been working on this issue for 6 years here in the Philippines, which is ground zero for this crime. And along with accountability, I still have a lot of hope. And also, I would say the last word is urgency. When we work on these cases and we see the ages of the victims, they're very young. The abuse is quite severe and traumatic. There has to be a global sense of urgency that we must do everything to protect children from this crime, and we must do it now.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. I think we're leaving this with the fantastic words on hope. Definitely, my hope is now bigger, and expectation is bigger to have you, John, involved in this, to have Maria involved in this issue, have Joanna, Yalda, and Abdul Rahman, and many others who we would like to involve in this work as well. And this hope is growing. We heard a lot about the scope of the problem of online abuse, child abuse. We heard a lot about possible AI solutions could be used at the different stage in the chain of the abuse. We've heard some recommendations for what we need to do to build the necessary public-private partnerships and to help law enforcement agencies and related authorities to learn from the cutting-edge big tech solutions. Looking at the full virtual room we have today with diverse representation from all across the world, I also see motivated individuals, and that's what I was talking about, the hope. In my view, we have all the ingredients we need to really tackle this problem head up and to make a real difference. As I said at the start, AI can be a life changer. We need to properly use it, of course. As a parent, I personally feel responsible to do everything I can for my children and for all our children. They are one of the most vulnerable elements of our society. At the same time, children are our future, and we owe to them to do everything we can to protect them and make our digital world safer for them to grow and enjoy the benefits of it. In our soon to launch and in our project together with UAE, we will plan to work to help launch law enforcement to leverage this technology through a series of pilot projects. And that's one of the most important deliverables, that the solutions which we develop will be directly used and bring tangible results. I would like to invite any interested participants in our event here today to join us in this project as a concerned stakeholder and to help us to make these pilots as successful as we can. As Maria emphasized, cooperation is definitely essential. So with this, I would like to challenge you all as a members of the AI for Good community to think how you can make a difference in your own capacity in this fight for our children. With this, we are concluding our session. I would like to thank, first of all, our fantastic panelists and this excellent collaboration of the stakeholders already, which emerged during this session. I would like to thank AI for Good Summit organizers and all the UN partners for the AI for Good to enable us to bring voices to entire world how artificial intelligence can do good. With this, I thank you all for your attention and for the participation.
Thank you, Irakli, and what a great discussion. A big thanks also to our panelists as well as to the participants of today's webinar for making it so engaging. You can also find more information and background material on aiforgood.itu.int.